Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Lara, a clinical pharmacist specializing in functional medicine, as well as a certified yoga teacher and Reiki master. I run a truly integrative health coaching practice encompassing functional medicine lab testing, yoga and meditation, and a sprinkling of Reiki energy medicine. Join me here on Light Body Radio to break through your health plateau and come into alignment with your natural vitality. Hello and welcome. Welcome to Light Body Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Lara, and today I have with me Jaron Lukas. He is the CEO and founder of Yumwoof Natural Pet Food, a non-GMO dog food brand. And he is also the author of the Canine Cocomega Effect. Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to talk about this with you. And this is going to be interesting because we're going to start from the pet perspective, but I have a feeling we'll also merge into the human impacts of this as well.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the cool things about the Canine Cocomega Effect is it's not only for canines. It works equally on humans too. And that's one of the takeaways that I hope people really get from the book is the fact that combining certain fats together can help us create extra microbiome diversity, which ultimately is associated with greater longevity. So excited to chat about it today.
Yeah, I think that's something that we don't really, there's a lot of talk out there these days about the microbiome, but we're still just starting to scratch the surface of its implications and its impact on not only our health, but like you said, longevity.
Yeah, the crazy thing about microbiome research is it really only started to gain speed about 10 years ago. And unfortunately, the more that we study it, the more we realize we don't know anything about it. In fact, one of the chapters that I have at the end, I think a lot of us at this point know there's good bacteria and gut bacteria and they're fighting in the microbiome. I do discuss that in the book for not only for people who don't already know about that, but I kind of give some more research into getting into the next level of understanding around that. However, one of the things that I realized in writing this book happened because I did a collaborative chapter towards the end with a veterinarian named Dr. Ava Frick. And this was a really interesting chapter for me because we started to explore the connection between the microbiome and basically mineral imbalances, which is a bigger deal than I realized. But one of the really just kind of short, interesting takeaways from that is for people suffering from IBS, that tends to be a very significant temporary mineral imbalance that affects essentially electrolytes in the intestines or stomach. So when for instance, when additional potassium is released back into the digestive tract, that also has an impact on what bacteria are in our gut microbiome. So that's an area that's literally at the bleeding edge of microbiome research. We don't know too much about it yet, but we are seeing the early signs of those links, and it just shows how kind of circular everything is, how new this research really is altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. So let's back up a little and just tell us a little bit about you and how you became, interested in doing this work.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I previously came from a tech background and data analytics background, which I applied after learning that I have food allergies, decided to apply that to pet food. And, I was one of those stories that's way too common where all of my dermatologists just gave me steroids and different medicine. It, worked for a while, all the way up to the point, it works until it doesn't. And you go deeper and deeper. And it got even to the point where one doctor injected me with steroids and I didn't know any better at the time. And so, that worked really well for 6 months until, all of my skin flare-ups started coming back even worse than before.
Hmm.
Well, turns out I just have food allergies. And as long as I don't eat certain foods, I don't get any skin issues, something that like no dermatologist had ever even suggested I might be a cause. And
Yeah.
so, through that process and through, just like falling in love with my own dog and a lot of things that kind of happened to me, that Yumwoof actually kind of came out of me spending a year in meditation, deciding that I wanted to do something very tangible for the world. So that's where I got to like, I wanted to elevate a physical type of thing that could improve nutrition. And unfortunately, too many pet food brands today are, essentially so tied into different retailers and middlemen that the actual value we get, just pretty much you could throw every dry kibble into this to start.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, as I explored the industry more and more, I just really started to understand how bad the shape of the pet food industry is. And so, you know, just all of these learnings over the course of half a decade now have all kind of come together, and that became Yumwoof. And Yumwoof is a non-GMO dog food brand with air dried dog food, basically as premium as it gets. And so we've really been trying to create ultimately products that I want to feed my own dog with all of my crazy requirements, like no peas, no legumes, keep it low carb, keep it air dried so we don't oxidize the fats. Two of the biggest kind of like bad things you see in pet food today are seed oils and oxidized fats. And so,
Hmm.
we just kind of do all these things to hopefully help dogs live longer through better gut health.
Yeah. So, what exactly is the Cocomega effect specifically?
The Cocomega effect is a very interesting synergy that coconut oil and omega 3s have on each other. And this is very new research that's only been seen over the last few years. But in my book, I cite 162 studies supporting this effect and its validity.
Hmm.
It's very cool, though. When you combine MCTs and lauric acid from coconut oil with especially fish oil, although it really does work with all types of omega 3s, but specifically with the DHA form, which is like a higher quality, you tend to see it. It's like the reason people take fish oil, basically. When you combine coconut oil and fish oil, they have these synergistic properties that do two things. They have anti-inflammatory effects that you don't get from either alone. So you're kind of boosting the anti-inflammatory properties of these super fats. And then in addition to that, they are shown to lead to greater microbiome diversity. It's almost like taking a probiotic, even though you're not. And so these effects that it has, along with the greater microbiome diversity, should be expected to create greater longevity in our dogs and humans. And so that's really what I go talking about in the book is the recent research, really supporting it with facts. Again, lots and lots of studies kind of supporting that this works. And we see it all the time at Yumwoof. Like our products have kind of already been pre-formulated even before we realized that we were taking advantage of this Cocomega effect.
Hmm.
That's really what we've been doing, it turns out, over the last 3 years. And so, we have so many dogs who come to us taking allergy medicine like Apoquil and very, very kind of like harsh on the body. So a lot of pet parents want to get their dogs off that, maybe like having a more natural treatment for it. And, every dog is different, of course, but we've seen so many success stories on like just dogs completely either getting off Apoquil, reducing their symptoms substantially. So I think that can really be attributed to what we dive into in the research here with coconut oil and omega 3s.
So, so you mentioned seed oils at the beginning of this conversation. Why is that such a big deal? And what's, I guess, why are they so damaging?
Yeah. And people often refer to seed oils as inflammatory, but I feel like we don't really appreciate what that means. It sounds something that's a little bit woo-woo or wishy-washy. Oh, it's inflammatory. But what I talk about in the book, and I go into like the biochemical reactions that are happening here.
Mhm.
But an example is that seed oils, which are high in omega-6, very, very high in omega-6, lead to the production of inflammatory molecules like PGE2 and cytokines. These are all like very much associated with every autoimmune issue. Like
Mhm.
people who have autoimmune issues tend to have an overproduction of these things. And so when we feed ourselves or our dogs too many, it's sort of like our bodies are resilient. They can eat a little bit of seed oil, but when we are in a chronic state of just every day eating 16 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3, we're not doing our body any favors. We are supporting chronic inflammation by doing that. Whereas if we can get closer to a 1-to-1 omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, then we're allowing these omega-3s to actually inhibit a lot of these inflammatory pathways. And that, when I was talking about this collaborative chapter that I did with Ava Frick, that is we have a really cool chart in that section showing how these Cocomega superfats actually block inflammation at various points along that pathway. So you really can reduce inflammation just by rebalancing omega-3s to omega-6s as a start. And so when we think about pet parents, it's like there are certain steps to take. The first one is to stop feeding our dogs dry kibble. Like that alone, I mean, that can add years to your dog's life. And
Mhm.
so, one and the number one reason, besides like all the terrible ingredients in it, is the fact that there is no such thing as a non-inflammatory dry kibble, because the hot extrusion process used to cook it oxidizes all the fats. And so
Mm.
we just keep feeding our dogs free radicals over time. Unfortunately, I don't think that there's like a major conspiracy here. However, uh, we should be mindful of the fact that the largest pet food companies, Mars and Nestle, which own like 70% of pet food in the United States, also own the majority of the veterinary clinics. So, I don't think they're like trying to harm animals or anything, but they certainly don't have an incentive to make things better, so to
Mhm.
speak. So, and we don't see that happening. If anything, their ingredients keep getting worse. Anytime we try to launch a new product, we're always being pushed back towards dry kibble. And, it's because it's easy for a lot of these manufacturers.
Mm.
It's cheap, it's easy, it's what they've been set up to do. So, we have just been working extra hard trying to launch better products, and it is hard to do, but obviously we all want our dogs to live longer, and the first way to do that is to just feed them natural food.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny that, or maybe not funny, that can be such a foreign concept to so many of us, is feeding our animals, their pets that we love, actual real food. you
It,
know,
it
um,
really is funny, Lara. Because I guess it even took me a long time to really appreciate the fact that like we're all biological creatures.
mhm.
There isn't too much, like humans and dogs in particular are very similar. There are definitely differences. Like, we can eat chocolate and dogs cannot. But, as long as dogs can eat whatever ingredient we're looking at as well, the biological effects on them are almost always the same as they are on humans.
Yeah. I want to ask you, maybe this might be a little random, but since we were just talking about the dry kibble and how there's really not a good one, there has been this talk lately about the grain-free kibbles causing more heart problems with dogs. Is there gravity and weight to that, or like why would a grain-free versus a grain filled kibble be different?
Ooh, we're bringing up the most controversial topic in all of pet food.
So good.
It, but it's a good one. And, you're referring to this DCM heart issue that kind of came to prominence around 2018, where a study showed that all these grain-free diets had been linked to heart issues in dogs, basically heart inflammation. And so, you know, once that happened, pet parents, I think en masse, just said we have to go back to grain inclusive diets. And we really did formulate our first product, Perfect Kibble, which despite the name is an air dried dog food, but we really formulated it with that in mind. Like, there were a couple of things that pet parents started to look at. First, they said, let's go grain inclusive. Second, they started saying, let's not use what some of the other ingredients that are put in grain-free dog foods, including peas and legumes. So those were highly connected also to potentially inhibiting the uptake of taurine. All of this kind of tied into like dogs not getting enough taurine. Sometimes you also saw taurine being added as a supplement. Taurine, by the way, is like, well, we do add it to Perfect Dog Food Mix, another one of our products, kind of for that reason, just to help pet parents feel safe. But like, again, it's one of those things where your dog is probably getting enough taurine. And so it's been a very controversial topic. I mean, the FDA even came out with a new paper a couple years later, basically discrediting their first one. But they've provided no answers, and also is a very limited sample size of around 300 dogs. And so really nobody knows what happened. But if we use a little bit of common sense, we can pretty safely say that dogs don't need grains in order to live a long life or not get DCM. So, while I still think that we don't know what caused it, and anyone who says that they do is probably behind on the research, at the same time, we can just like look to an ancestral diet as to what dogs might be able to thrive with. So we're going to say that like, a high meat, probably nose to tail diet is going to be a good idea for dogs. They are scavengers, so they are able to eat, like they do eat grasses in the wild. Like, we've all seen our dog eat grass. So that's like kind of a source of fiber. I do think that literally proves that dogs can eat, grasses. In addition to that, if you look at the DNA of a dog and compare it to a wolf, and I actually talk about this in the book as well, because we dive deep into, what's the ideal diet for a dog? Is it raw? Is it like a grain inclusive or a grain free? And so many other options. And the answer is, I do kind of push back against the raw diet a little bit in the book. If you're trying to optimize microbiome diversity, raw diet would not be the optimal diet. But we're about to launch a new dog food called Perfect Feast that I feel like is the balance, because it is grain free. I, over the past 3 years, have moved more into like, we should probably feed our dogs a grain free diet, feed them limited grains. Sure. Like, they ate that in the wild. I would definitely say that an overabundance of them are not going to do them any favors, though. In addition to that, I think looking to trying to get vitamins and minerals from natural sources is also a pretty good idea. So in this, and just as an example, like if you look at vitamin K from a meat source versus a vegetable source, like vitamin K1, it's going to have maybe like a 10 to 20% absorption rate. So you take like a gram and you get 100 milligrams that actually like kind of like help your body. If you take the same amount of vitamin K from a meat source, you're going to get like 80 to 90% absorption. And so as we're finding out more and more that, just like, especially when it comes to dogs, like, okay, well, if we want to help their liver, let's just feed them more liver. If we want to help their kidney, let's feed them more kidney. Like, one of the funny things you start to learn is like, just eating the organ meat of what you're trying to make better is usually the answer. That's where like all the we take all these supplements. Like humans, we're often recommended choline for any sort of liver problems, or if you want to just increase your liver health. And I've taken all sorts of choline supplements, but the best source of choline is just eating beef liver. Or, I mean, there are a few others, but like you could just eat beef liver. And so I think bringing things back to simplicity is really a good idea. So when we look at, grain inclusive versus grain free, how do we help our dogs? I mean, we should probably just feed them a little bit of chicken heart or turkey heart or beef heart or whatever it may be, and that's probably going to prevent a lot of these issues that were happening. So, but who knows? I mean, these are like mass dry kibble manufacturers that were all implicated in this. Like, who knows if some Chinese ingredient like made its way into their supply chain? I mean, I would almost be more inclined to think that's what happened, and we'll never find out. So I think it's one of those things that will always be the number one debate. We definitely see it in our Facebook comments. Like, people like to get in these debates about uh, uh, grain versus no grains. And, it's like, let's use some common sense. Like, dogs lived for millions of years without eating a whole lot of grain, and they didn't like die of DCM that we know about. So, that's probably not the best conclusion. And I think that, most grains do tend to be a little bit more inflammatory. Like, there's a really interesting chart in humans showing how the human brain actually grew for 2 million years. So humans have been around like 200 to 300,000 years. But our predecessors, very similar to us, had been around for a lot longer. And so we can look at the human brain growing for 2 million years, and then we enter the agricultural revolution. And then that's over the last 12,000 years, it started shrinking slowly. So, I mean, is that the cause? I mean, I do think it is highly correlated and related causally. But, you can also look at just how things like rice and other very high carb, all these things in moderation, probably okay. But when you overload the carbs, it does like tend to be inflammatory.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think unfortunately, it's in terms of the statements that come out, and I'll use loose air quotes, of our scientific leadership. A lot of times, unfortunately, is not based on things that were actually studied in the numbers. So again, sample size is really important. And then, looking at the different biases that are, confounding the different research that's out there too. And so I think that the news media tends to also sort of sometimes grab hold of something, even though it's not based in what we would consider good science. And again, air quotes, but in the scientific community, we're taught, what makes a research paper good, valid. And go ahead.
Study of 5 rats, and now it's a CNN headline.
Yeah. So a study of like 300 dogs is nothing really compared. Think about the amount of people that are pet owners in our country alone, let alone, Canada and Europe and, across the planet. So it's a pretty big assumption. I think it, I wouldn't really call it necessarily a conclusion to extrapolate from such a small sample size to say something that can have such a large impact on an animal's life. And so, and we know through so many human studies and human evolution that, like you said, like grains are very inflammatory. And while our ancestors did make a transition, I think there was still a lot about their life and their implementing grains into the lifestyle that's way different than how we implement them in our lives today. in such a almost a like very skewed manner if you think about it.
Yeah, well, it's just crazy how industrialized the world has become too. Like we really lose sight. I certainly lost sight until very recently of like just how much work went into preparing anything you wanted to eat, like up until 100 years ago. So like all of human history has been like if you wanted to eat, you really had to work for it. Like even making bread, it's like you can't just go buy in the 1700s. You can't just go buy yeast from the supermarket. Like you had to like go and collect it from your field.
Mm-hmm.
And so and there's so many questions there. Like I don't know if I'm gonna like defend bread in this podcast, but I would have to imagine that like uh, having all of the natural diversity of bacteria that would be included in you know collecting a yeast from a field and using that. I mean that probably has some benefits just to start on like preventing allergies. I'm
Mm-hmm.
totally guessing, but you know I think it would make sense. And so, because the more we expose ourselves in small amounts to our environment, you know, we can potentially help reduce seasonal allergies and stuff like that. Everyone's different, but you get actually bringing that around back to the Cocomega effect. Even if no matter what kind of allergy we have, we can reduce the symptoms by eating Cocomega superfats. And so that's one of the really cool things here. It gets into kind of like first it's just rebalancing a lot of our omega-3 to omega-6s, but the adding the coconut oil to the fish oil or to the cod liver oil, any really kind of omega-3 supercharges it. And so that's what all this research shows is that for a variety of reasons, it supercharges the effectiveness of the omega-3s. And this was shown on both humans and dogs. And then in addition to that, I also talk about how important it is to include what I call the carbohydrate superfat, which is fiber, including fiber in all of this, because the further research shows that if we combine fiber, which then turns into short chain fatty acids such as butyrate. So that butyrate actually helps increase the absorption of omega-3s into our cells. But that's really, I think, the key takeaway of this book is that synergistic ingredients, synergistic fats, have very cool and beneficial effects on our bodies. And so like if we're having seasonal allergies or like I'm gonna go eat some of the things I'm allergic to, like Mexican food, which that's hard to avoid always. It is very
Mm-hmm.
delicious. So like if we actually just like take a shot of some super fats before that, we will likely reduce at least some of the impact that meal is going to have on us. So it's just little things like that we can do that are very interesting, and that I hope people get out of reading this book is like kind of just an easy playbook to reduce their autoimmune issues.
And is there a specific type of fiber that you combine it with that is synergistic?
Really most types of fiber I think are pretty good. We don't know too much about fiber yet is the thing.
Okay.
I mean, certainly research has been done on fibers like inulin. I would call inulin a very high quality source, and definitely like insoluble fiber. I mean, you want both. We want all kinds of fiber. But one of the takeaways that I think we will find science finding in like 10 to 15 years is that each type of fiber actually produces different families of gut bacteria. So like
Mm-hmm.
if we're eating a fiber that's derived from like pick some random vegetable like or fruit like apples.
Broccoli. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
broccoli fiber versus apple fiber. I
Yeah.
think that we're going to find that like fiber isn't just fiber. Like each of those is going to produce different beneficial. I think in both those cases they would likely be beneficial, but okay, maybe one family is better for people with food allergies and another is better for people who like have bad breath, or I don't know. So, I think there's no science done on this yet.
Mm,
we are so early in microbiome research that
mhm,
we tend to find like, we'll see like, okay, these families of bacteria grew from doing this one study. But yeah, I mean, definitely nothing has been done yet on showing like all these individual fibers. So to get back to your question, I think the best thing we can do is actually try to get a diversity of fibers, and that's where I get back. One reason I think that a strict raw diet for dogs may not be the most ideal. Certainly, the head nose to tail feeding is like a very good principle of that diet, but and a lot of raw people do add coconut oil and they add some fiber, and so I think when you get there, I still will always say air drying the food is going to be beneficial, just to reduce pathogens. But
okay.
yeah, because that's bad bacteria. It's like eating a bad probiotic or something, and so
Mhm.
we can avoid that by at least flash cooking our food. So it can, a raw diet can be okay, but generally speaking, a lot of them are very deficient in a lot of that ingredient variety.
Mhm.
And so that's an important thing. Like if microbiome diversity is the number one kind of statistic that we can tie to longevity, and with that, reduced obesity, reduced allergies, reduced gut health issues. Literally every study is basically tied to microbiome diversity. And so using that as the barometer, if we're just trying to optimize that, like we do want to probably get some amount of fruits and vegetables in our dog's diet.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate too that our cells are made up of a phospholipid bilayer. So what does that actually mean? It means our cells are made up of this bilayer of lipids. So that's fat, it's cholesterol. It's really important. And so in so much of, I know on the human side of things, fats have really been demonized. And we're finally starting to feel like come out of that era. And, we're at least we have, the different cardiovascular associations saying, oh, okay, well, Mediterranean style eating, which is high in, olive oil and omega-3s and fish oils. And so we're finally starting to come back to that and that acknowledgement that it is good. And so I think it's really fascinating that now, from books like yours, that we're really starting to understand the synergy of combining the different types of good fat and what an even better effect that can have on our health. And again, having that healthy fat intake helps your body absorb certain nutrients. A lot of our nutrients are what we call fat soluble, meaning like there has to be fat available for our body to absorb them. And so I think that can, sometimes be overlooked too. Like if you're going to take a vitamin D supplement, if you take it on an empty stomach, it's not going to really do much for you because you need that fat present in order for it to be absorbed.
Yeah, that's a great point. The fats are just like a native part of our natural biology, and we definitely need them. And unfortunately, so many fats are produced as I mean, canola oil is probably the worst fat in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is it a seed oil, but it's made through this 11-step chemical manufacturing process.
Yeah.
At one point, it's like this black sludge that's absolutely disgusting. But I mean, we created canola oil because like industrial producers were looking for a way to monetize a lot of their like scraps, a lot of their excess, just like stuff
Yeah.
they were producing,
Isn't
and
it? Yeah.
so it's
It's
like
that
what
hydrocarbon byproduct, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
and so parts of it are.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just better to stick to things like olive oil. I mean, olive oil at this point is so heavily researched to be beneficial, and in fact, I thought about kind of like adding that. At some point I want to do a human version of the book, so it'll just be the Cocomega Effect someday. I'm still writing a book is no easy task, so I'm
No.
still just kind of that's not coming out anytime soon. The Canine Cocomega Effect really says it all. But I did question like whether I wanted to explore olive oil too. And I just I just couldn't add that deep dive on top of the 6 months that I spent doing this after, going
Mhm.
through. I mean, at this point, over the last 4 years, I've gone over 3,000 clinical studies, from front to back, and so
Yeah.
a lot was involved also with this book, and it ends up being a lot of research, but ultimately omega-3s very, very beneficial. Olive oil, another one of those. And like humans have been eating olive oil for so long, it's like, you know it is just, it never really seems to be bad for us, whereas like a lot of these new oils are very untested. The people who are funding the studies on them are the manufacturers, so like should we
Mhm.
trust that? And then kind of as you were mentioning before, like who's even like running the FDA? To be honest, the FDA lately is, they did something that really bothered me, which was they made NMN, which is a supplement that I'm not necessarily a big fan of. I just like, as of now, don't think it's that effective. I
Mhm.
think the research also shows NMN for longevity not to be that effective,
Mhm.
but and Dr. Sinclair will say that it's a fat soluble molecule, and the research studies didn't administer it properly, which may or may not be true. I think it'll be found to be not super effective in any scenario, but I think it's a huge injustice that the FDA has taken a molecule that is not dangerous. Like, there's no reason to believe that it is dangerous, and
Mhm.
it's something. NMN is something that resides in our bodies anyway, very associated with longevity, and they banned it from the supplement market in order to allow a company, just one private company, to sell it and as a pharmaceutical. And so,
Mhm.
I think that just shows that the level of corruption that we still have in the FDA. I'm sure there are many, many fine people in the organization, but I found that to be absolutely terrible, what they
Yeah.
did there.
Yeah, and that's not the first time they've done that either. Like they've tried to do that with NAC and acetylcysteine. But luckily it's that one is, I think, similar. It's similar to NMN. But anyway, yeah, they have a long history of doing things like that, which unfortunately I don't think is in the best interest of the public. It's obvious like which interest they've chosen in these specific instances.
Yep,
We'll say
exactly.
that. So, all right. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time here, but what are 3 tips to help dogs live longer?
Ooh, this is a good one. The first is intermittent fasting, and fasting in general. Intermittent fasting has the same benefits on dogs as it does humans. And, putting our dogs on a 24-hour fast is also going, occasionally, is also going to have benefits too. Like, depending on how good I'm being, I'll do a 24-hour fast every week, sometimes every 2 to 3 weeks, again, depending on how good I'm being. But,
Hmm.
I mean, just putting our body in these modes of kind of starvation, ultimately are always shown to be beneficial. Think about the struggle our ancestors went through, that dogs went through, and trying to find their next meal. We're really replicating that. So the first is intermittent fasting. The second is,
Wait. I want
sure.
to. For intermittent fasting, what is your time frame for a dog?
It can be pretty loose. I would just say to start, just feed our dogs 2 meals a day. Like,
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't think 3 meals are necessary. And like, my dog will typically eat at 10 a.m. and 5 or 6 p.m. So it's not too tight of an intermittent fasting schedule at all. But I think that when we're feeding our dog 3 meals a day, unless our dog has like diabetes or something like that, where it's maybe a different, they have different circumstances,
Mhm.
typically, there's no need for a third meal. You can feed it, but I don't.
Yeah.
The second thing we can do for our dogs is to stop feeding them dry kibble. So as I was alluding to before, dry kibble is made through a manufacturing process called hot extrusion that oxidizes all the fats. So it's really like this grinder that
Mhm.
they put high heat and high pressure through and push the food through. And so not only is it grinding the nutrients down, which is what you hear about a lot when people talk about dry kibble,
Mhm.
but the bigger problem is that it oxidizes all the fats, turning them into free radicals, which when we feed that to our dog for years and years, we're feeding them unpaired electrons that need to bond with another one. The way that they do that is by stealing electrons from cells in our dog's body. And so over time, that's what's going to lead to cancer, uh, general degeneration of cellular health, meaning like all sorts of diseases. And so, feeding our dogs anything but dry kibble is a huge, like, multi-year life extension. And again, every dog is different, but like on average, pretty safe to say that our dogs can live for, a couple years longer not feeding them dry kibble. Then finally and this is going to be no surprise to anyone who has been listening to this so far, but it's feeding our dogs the right fats, and in particular, Cocomega super fats. But getting rid of the seed oils, that's been a big part of our message at Yumwoof lately. And, it's something that I feel very strongly about because almost every dog food brand uses seed oils. Like, for anyone who's listening to this, go check your dog's food, see if it has sunflower oil, safflower oil. If you feed them really bad dog food, if your dog's food has canola oil listed in the ingredients right now, like, that you are like not even feeding a mid-tier dog food, by the way. But
Mhm.
even our top like fresh food competitors online still have all sorts of sunflower oil, seed oil, and there are a variety of reasons for that, but those don't have to be used. No matter what they'll tell you about, like, making sure that the omega-6 levels are right. One, they're not balancing it with more expensive omega-3s, so that's just one knock against them right there. And then two, we can formulate dog food to have the right levels of omega-6 without seed oil. So essentially, it's just a cheap ingredient that is not doing anyone any good. In the pet industry in particular, there's a lot of blog articles that have been written by the major dog food brands, Purina, stuff like that, talking about the benefits of seed oils or the benefits of omega-6s. And people repeat those blog articles all over the internet. But the fact is, in human nutrition, you never hear anything like that. All the research just shows why more omega-3s, more coconut oil is beneficial. So definitely getting rid of bad fats, getting the right fats into our dog's diet can play a huge role in helping them live longer and have fewer inflammatory issues.
Yeah. Oh man. So all of that is so good. I'm so grateful for all the time and effort that you put into researching and writing this book. I think it's going to really lend a lot of valuable, concise, information out there so like people can have a good, reliable source and maybe have a more clear path forward in how to help our dogs and our loved ones live longer. And again, I think there's so many aspects about this that is translatable into the human side of things, which is why I wanted to talk to you today. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to bring forward before we finish up?
It's been such a pleasure being here and getting to know you over the past little bit now. And people can find me, Jaron Lukas with a K, on Instagram. Yumwoof is my company. We make non-GMO air dried dog food, and my book, The Canine Cocomega Effect, you can both find it on yumwoof.com and Amazon. And Amazon's the best place to get it. And I hope everyone enjoys reading about it and changes their diet like I did. Like after writing this book, I really did start eating fish twice a week. Any day I don't eat fish, I now eat cod liver oil as a supplement and boost that with MCTs and lauric acid. And so I hope people after reading the research are as convinced as I am about this.
Yes. So everybody definitely go over to yumwoof.com, check out the dog food, check out the book, The Cocomega Effect. And thank you, Jaron. Again, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Great to be here.